In this video I'm going to show you how to make a very simple vegan pasta. So let's begin by looking at the spices that you're going to need. We're going to use 1/4 teaspoon each of bacon seasoning, sometimes called bacon powder. And you used to be able to get around here bacon chips, which were the same thing, but they were in sort of solid chips. Obviously make sure you get vegan version and not actual bacon. And 1/4 teaspoon of thyme. Notice that this line seems to call thyme leaves, and they call oregano leaves, and basil leaves. It's the same thing. They're just trying to fancy it up. So 1/4 teaspoon each of bacon seasoning and thyme. 1/2 teaspoon of basil. 1 teaspoon each of oregano, garlic and Worcestershire sauce. Obviously you could use fresh garlic instead of the powder if you wanted to, but the garlic's not a big part of the taste of this, so you're probably better off saving time and using a garlic powder, I would think. 4 good shakes of salt. A good shake, that's a bit of a vague recommendation. I'd say that's a good shake. 4 of those. You need quite a lot of salt. Some vegetable stock powder, 1 tablespoon. This is chicken, of course. You can also get beef and just called vegetable. All of them work for this recipe. Obviously they'll make it taste slightly different, but they all work well with this recipe. So just whichever one you prefer or whichever one you have to hand. So let's go over these spices again. 1/4 teaspoon of bacon seasoning, 1/4 teaspoon of thyme, 1/2 teaspoon of basil, 1 teaspoon each of oregano, garlic and Worcestershire sauce, 4 good shakes of salt, and a tablespoon of stock powder. Alright, so next let's have a look at the solid ingredients that we're going to be using. So we have 1 large zucchini, sometimes called a courgette, which I have washed under the tap beforehand. You can also use 2 small ones instead of 1 large one. About 250 grams of mushrooms, also washed under the tap. About 125 grams of pasta, any shape. 1 onion, and about 450 grams of firm tofu. Make sure to get firm. What is it? Make sure to get firm tofu. Normal tofu will work, but it will break up a bit and it won't be as nice in my opinion. So let's go over those ingredients again. 1 large or 2 small zucchinis, also called courgettes. About 250 grams of mushrooms, and both the mushrooms and the zucchini / courgette should be washed under the tap. About 125 grams of pasta, of whatever shape you prefer. 1 onion, and about 450 grams of firm tofu. Please make sure to use firm tofu. So those are the solid ingredients. Let's have a look at what they look like when they're ready to start cooking. And because I'm very silly, I completely forgot to list 1 whole jar of pasta sauce in the ingredients. Don't do that, otherwise you'll have a pasta sauce that doesn't have any pasta sauce in it. Okay, so you can see that I've chopped the onion into quite small bits, and obviously that's going to fall apart further because onions are in layers. Drop one, I'll get that later. I've sliced the mushrooms into fairly thin slices. I've chopped the zucchini into quite small bits. The zucchini is probably the thing that's going to take the longest to cook. You'd think it'd be the onion, but it seems to be the zucchini most of the time. Anyway, the tofu I have cubed. Put in a bit of oil, can be vegetable oil or olive oil, whatever, I suppose. I just use normal vegetable oil. And then just put things on there as they get ready. As the water boils, put the pasta in, and as soon as stuff is chopped, it goes in the saucepan. I've just done it this way so I can sort of show you everything at once. It's a pretty forgiving recipe. It doesn't really matter, like you don't have to say I'll put the zucchini in first and then the mushrooms. You know, you can cook it for sort of 5 or 10 minutes, more or less time, and it will still come out nice. Basically, what I would do is, if you do want to worry about order, maybe put the pasta sauce in first, and then put the spices, and then mix them up. And that just makes sure that the spices are evenly mixed throughout the dish, and you won't get different bits that sort of taste different because they've got a bit more garlic or a bit less of something else. So that's what everything looks like when it's ready to go in. It takes about half an hour to cook, so I'm going to turn off the iPad and then I'll come back to you when it's ready to serve. So this is what it looks like when I've just put everything in the saucepan and put that on the stove. Now, as you can see, it's quite packed. This makes a lot of food. Just out of shot, I've got some water on a high heat. The main meal is on a very low heat. So you certainly can put other ingredients in there. You can use capsicum, red or green or yellow. You could also use eggplant, also known as aubergine to some people, but just bear in mind that it's gonna, that's going to increase the volume of the amount of food that you're making, and you probably want to cook it on with a lid so it'll be a bit quicker. There's not much to do at this stage once everything's in there. Basically, we're just waiting for the water to boil. I forgot to mention that I put a little bit of salt in the water. I don't know if that does anything, to be honest. This is one of those things I've always done. So we put some salt in the water. We wait for the water to boil. The water is currently on a high heat, as opposed to the main meal, which is on a low heat. When the water boils, we put the pasta in, take the lid off and put it down to a low heat. And then every 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to come over here and stir the main meal and stir the pasta if it's sticking a little bit. The volume will reduce as it cooks, so it'll be easier to stir. Normally what I do with the pasta is I put the pasta in the main meal once the pasta's a bit soft and the main meal has reduced, and then stir it all in together. But just to make it look a little bit nicer, I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to cook the pasta separately and use that as a bed to serve the main meal on when it's ready. I won't show you the occasional stirring. That's not terribly interesting, and it's fairly obvious. Just stir it every so often so it doesn't stick. So I'll get back to you when the meal is ready to serve. And that is what it looks like when it's been served. Normally, as I said, I would just mix in the pasta with the sauce, but in this case I've done it separately. It just looks a bit nicer. If you are doing it for a special occasion, or you care about the visual side of food, then you'd probably want to do that, or otherwise you probably want to do what I do, which is as soon as the pasta's ready, just pour it into the saucepan with the rest of the sauce and mix it in.